Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to Be On Air. I'm your host, Kaylee Marks. If you're an entrepreneur, coach, author, or have a brand and are trying to grow your business, or even if you just have a message to share, then this show is for you. We are sharing proven blueprints to amplify yourself, and we'll discuss every step of the podcaster's journey to give you the mindset, tools, and community that you need to launch and grow your own impactful podcasting platform so that you can be on air. Before we get into today's episode, if you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing this podcast with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps so much. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Be On Air. I'm Kaylee Marks, and today I'm speaking with Billy J Atwell. He's host of the Unshakable Self-Confidence podcast, a top Apple podcast. He's an author and a confidence coach, and I've really been loving his podcast and the content he's been posting, and I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. We've never spoke before, and as soon as I got on the call with him, I knew that this was going to be good. So without further ado, Billy, thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, no, man, it's definitely my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I mean, I'm starting to get on other people's show. It's sort of an interesting dynamic because, you know, being a podcast for your show, you love talking to people. That's why you do it. But when you're the guest, it's such a different dynamic that I'm exploring. So thank you so much for letting me have this flip side experience of the world of podcasting. I appreciate it, man, truly.
Absolutely. And the idea of this show is kind of meta. It's a podcast about podcasts, it's not the first time that's been done. What I'm trying to do with this, though, is give equal light to both the background work that goes into podcasting and kind of sharing your wisdom with my audience on that, but then also making sure that all the work that you're doing, you know, the unshakable self-confidence, the work with fear, the work with devotion and prayer and connecting with source. I want to be giving my listeners both things in every episode. So I can tell this is going to be really fun to kind of break down your story and your journey with your podcast and then kind of see where that leads us. So if you wouldn't mind, could you talk a little bit about how you got started in podcasting and how Unshakable Self-Confidence came to exist?
Yeah. Okay. So the podcast got started 5 seasons ago. I was still about 2 years into recovery from my second abusive relationship with yet another narcissistic alcoholic and violent at that point too. And, you know, I started to have these questions like, how did I get here? You know, because there was this violence going on and it ended up the relationship being, I was almost strangled to death. I started to have this question about, I mean, how did this happen to me? Right. And so I started, you know, I'm a huge Joseph Campbell's fan, so I'm going to probably throw in some references out there. But that was sort of the moment that every person has on their hero's journey, where you are set on the journey. And so that was my quest. How did I get here? How did I find myself into this relationship? Why was I seeing these recurring patterns? And that led me to study fear and the power of thought. And I had done that for 2 years, and I wasn't quite satisfied. And at the time, my voice acting mentor, she was like, well, why not start a podcast? Because I really wasn't getting into the whole voice acting thing. I hated the whole audition thing. And she's like, well, you know, I was trained in the engineering and stuff on that side, you know, for the voice acting. She's like, well, why not do that? And so I started a show called Fear Not. And it really was about my investigation into what is fear and what is this thing that we bow so willingly to, this power source, and why does it control us and all this stuff. And so originally it was on 3 times a week. I was on a Monday, Wednesday schedule with little 15-minute shows where I was interviewing people all around the world. It didn't matter who they are or what their expertise was. I just wanted to know, what was your biggest fear and what did you do to get over it? And I loved it. There were so many wonderful conversations, and a lot of these people I'm still in contact with. This is also the beauty, as you know, about podcasting, the collective sort of community. But I think in terms of meeting people and breaking the myth of fear, and like I was the only one, which was definitely a belief that I had, like I was the only one residing in fear. There were the Friday shows, which were longer shows, which I was doing interviews with like Professor Bruce Lipton, Mark Waldman, and Andrew Newberg, neuroscientists. I was speaking to Buddhists, I was speaking to Hindus, I was speaking to Christians and New Thought Christians, all these kinds of concepts. I mean, I was just thinking, I spoke to Dawson Church, this concept of speaking to experts who were more advanced in this concept of we can control our thoughts and our thoughts control our reality and our self-perceptions. And so that carried on. About 2 years ago, I kind of felt contained and constrained, sort of the symbolic, it was time to shed the skin. And so the whole show got rebranded into Unshakable Self-Confidence in this new thing because it was my new level, man. And so I went from basically being Luke Skywalker to Yoda.
Yeah.
To put it, I warned you I was going to throw in those hero journey references.
You became the guide.
Yeah. And, it just, that sort of changed and I'm here and it's growing beyond the podcast now, but that's sort of maybe the abbreviated, though probably not so much, the story of why I became a podcaster and where I'm at currently as in that journey.
The rebrand is really interesting to me because fear not in a sense is a positive, but it has a tinge still of the not in it. Like not fear, whereas Unshakable Self-Confidence is fully positive kind of.
Yeah. So Fear Not was originally called Fear Not because when I read the Old Testament and the original Greek, because right when you hear the word fear not, it means don't feel afraid. That's what everyone thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you feel afraid, you feel like a coward. You're like, what's wrong with me? I can't fear not. Well, it's a mistranslation, as most of the Bible is. It comes from a Greek word, phobos, which means withdraw. So in the story, the mythology that's found there, when God was speaking to the Jews, he was like, fear not. He was like, don't feel afraid. He was like, don't withdraw and panic when you feel the fear. And so that's the whole thing that I've learned about fear is that's the power. It's an illusion. It doesn't have any real power over you. And the trick to break through on the other side and to regain your sovereignty is to stand in the fear, to not back down, to not withdraw, because it will concede. It must. It's a divine law, like gravity, the sun coming up. You don't have to figure it out. You just have to put it into motion. And so Unshakable Self-Confidence was because the concept of what I've discovered is life is essentially a video game and there's levels and you reach a level, then you burn and regenerate and you move on. So it's a completely different concept, but organic growth, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was on the episode I was listening to of yours yesterday. You were talking about sort of like the eye of the storm or the hula hoop idea of like you're in the center. And the point isn't that you're not going to feel pain and fear and all these things. The point is that you kind of you can witness yourself feeling those things and remain steady in that as observer and contain it. And that felt really appropriate, I think, especially right now, COVID, lockdown, political strife, the ever increasing closeness of death. I think that having coping skills with fear, learning how to dance with fear, learning how to do that is such a valuable skill. And I think your podcast for that reason is just like a huge well of awesome resources. So how long ago did you start? Because you're in like episode 300 or something, right?
Yeah. Let's see. This past October, we went into our 5th season. We just started our 5th season.
That's a long time. That's many episodes. So a lot of my audience will probably be newer podcasters. And one thing I see and hear a lot is just this, first of all, the fear of putting out the show in the first place is crippling. And I'm a podcast consultant, producer, and I've put out a lot of shows. I haven't put out my own show until now. And I came face to face with that same thing that everyone must be going through, this imposter syndrome of what are people going to think, all this stuff. So I'm curious, when you launched your show, did you come up against fear? And if you did, how did you overcome that? And what was that like?
Yeah, I knew you were going to answer that. First, let me tell everyone first, if you feel the fear, you're on the right track. Because fear does not approach in your life if you're just not living your fullest potential. If you aren't living your life the way that the divine created you, fear is not going to bother you. You're a slave. It's got you trapped. The minute you grow out of the illusion that fear is your master and you step into your authenticness, it's going to throw up that wall. It's just, again, it goes back to that. There are just rules to this virtual reality that we're experiencing time in. And if you can just understand the rules, you're going to crush it. You're feeling fear. You're on the right track. Just stand your ground. Don't withdraw and panic. Just keep moving forward, because fear's your bitch, man. It really is. I don't know how to put it. And I'm laughing at it now, but I mean, I've been studying this for 8 years. It's just, and the silliness of it all at this point of my consciousness, that fear is just the fact that we bow to this shadow is incredible. And I'm not disrespecting anyone, because I was there too. But if you could only understand, like, how ridiculous fear really is, and it's just these ominous sounding noises and shadows that really have absolutely no power. They're just illusions that you could literally just be gone, and they'll dissipate.
So do you feel like fear mainly manifests as self-talk?
I know you listen to the show, and what I've discovered is fear comes from what I call the inherited negative self-image. That's the vehicle in which fear enters into humanity and into your core belief. Fear is always outside of you. It's an energy force, for sure. It is, in terms of frequency and stuff, it is real, but it has no power over you. And so it tricks you into believing in its version of you, which is this negative self-image, and which takes a form of the inner critic or the self-doubt, or I'm not this and I can't this, whatever that is, the negative version of yourself. But it's never inside of you. That's part of the illusion and the trick too. And that gets a lot into the guilt and the shame that you feel when you try to do something and you fail, because then that whole narrative pops up and you're like, I'm stupid. What was I thinking? That's just a program that you've been tricked into believing through, and like I said, it's called the inherited negative self-image, or maybe I need to back up. So my story is I kept constantly this question of how did I get here again, was I found out this repeating pattern of being involved with very violent alcoholics. I was raised by 5 generations of women, all of which their husbands were violent alcoholics, even though I didn't see it. So there's a frequency that you sort of adopt. Like I said, I interviewed Professor Bruce Lipton, and that environment, you're shaped by your environment, you're shaped by the frequency, and you tune yourself to that. And so you have to break free from that. Now, that's a little bit more than maybe we have time to talk about, but fear is not inside of you. Fear whispers in your ear. And because you've been believing in that negative self-image for yourself for so long, you've forgotten who you really are. And so that's what we talk about on the show, is breaking free from that. But it does come, maybe to circle back real quick, it does come in the form of the inner critic, but that's just a lie. That's, where are you putting your attention? Where are you putting all that divine energy that is constantly and always being pumped through you? You've been staring at this version and you're giving it life, when you just need to learn how to turn your back on it and let it dissipate. Because, right, quantum observation, nothing exists if you don't observe it. I don't know, maybe if we've gotten off track, but
I think we're getting more and more on track. I think for the listeners, like, we're going to get into some more technical stuff. I want to make sure I make time to talk to you about your mic, your workflow, your recording setup, some tips for newer people building the community. But I think that those are hard skills, right? We're talking about soft skills. We're talking about like a subtler thing here that is even more powerful and potent to work on before a microphone, before an intro, before anything, is like really learning about this stuff, about fear, and about how to build that unshakable self-confidence. So I think we're really on track, and I'd love to just kind of keep meandering through this. So you mentioned the hero's journey. If someone doesn't know what that is, would you mind just briefly outlining what that is?
Yeah, so the term hero's journey comes from Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell spent his whole entire life studying the golden thread through all culture and the storytelling. Our ancestors spoke in a narrative which is called mythology. People think mythology means not real these days, like a myth, right? But mythology was a language, and mythology was never considered to be secular history. This is part of my problem with Christianity, is it's been interpreted as secular history when it's mythology. And it's very powerful mythology. You'll find the mythology in Buddhism and Hinduism. The problem is, even in those religions too, there's a secularism, there's a historical fact, and that strips it of its powers. So the hero's journey is through Egyptian culture. Greek culture is the more classic narrative, but there's a pattern formula, and you know what it is. Everyone knows what it is, whether you're a big Star Wars fan, which is sort of more transparent, or like one of my other favorite sort of classic ones is the Jim Henson's The Labyrinth
Yeah.
with David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. That is classic hero's journey. But even in terms of like a Sandra Bullock movie, like Miss Confidentiality, that's a hero's journey because there's the limited self that goes on a quest in which she's challenged and growth until she gets to who she is. There's a transformation. So that is the backbone, the template of a hero's journey, is that you're living in the world as a mortal and you have forgotten that you're divine, and something happens in your life that causes you to go on a quest, and you go on that quest. Again, The Wizard of Oz is another perfect example.
I love The Wizard of Oz. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think even in terms of, I mean, growing up as a child in the 70s and seeing that like every Easter or whatever, you know, you have a different take on it. But I watched it just a couple months ago without probably having seen it in nearly 30 years. And having this knowledge now, it becomes very, very clear how wonderful that movie is even in terms of the visual aspects to take you on that journey. But that's what it is. You're in your small self, something happens, you get transported into a quest, and you meet all these characters, which is all your internal, components. That's really what it is. It's an internal journey in the real world, but it's played out in a narrative of guides and allies and testing and stuff to get you to the center of the labyrinth where you meet the divinity and you go, that is me, and that is, and I am that. And you return to the traditional Hindu concept, or for whatever reason, it's popping into my head right now, like Tony Robbins, awaken the giant within. I don't like the way he's used that term, but that's the core. You remember who you are, and you either stay in the labyrinth, you move on, or you return back into society with the flame of knowledge, if you will. But that's the hero's journey.
Awesome explanation. Yeah. So you're talking there at the end about like self-realization and coming into communion with our true self. And the one thing I think about with the hero's journey is it's holographic in nature. It's fractal. It's a repeating thing. So we may have many hero's journeys within a larger cycle of a hero's journey. We may go into the abyss, and that can also be the start of the next hero's journey subcycle. And so I find it really interesting to look at my own life that way. And whenever challenges are coming up, or whenever a great guide comes into the scene, kind of like checking in where I'm at on that journey, and it can help kind of stabilize the path. And I think it's really powerful to overlay those archetypes. And for anyone listening, I just did an episode with Melissa Meter of Synchrosoma and the Synchrosoma podcast, and you can go back and listen to that for a little bit more on this as well. I think that the podcaster's journey is a hero's journey, and it's very much about trying to get to the center of the labyrinth and find ourselves, find our voice, find our community. And so in your own journey with your podcast, I know you said you went through a rebrand, which is really interesting. And I think people try and get everything perfect in the beginning, and they're not expecting change. So how did the change happen, and what was that process like?
When the change happened, it was organic. I had already had enough experience under my belt and research and personal transformation to realize that whether you call it Holy Spirit, GPS, or intuition, universal mind speaking to you, I just followed that guide. I think probably to help everyone out who may not be at that point right now. When I started the Fear Not show, I was totally into marketing. I'm so into branding. I'm, just an artist as well. And so, those were those elements. So I do understand the need to get it right at the first time. And what I can say to that is do your best, but just get it started, because it will grow. I never would have expected to rebrand. If you're having difficulty, the thing that came to mind, when I started to think about podcasts, I reached out to John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneurs on Fire. And he doesn't do that, but he gave me some resources. I emailed him direct. So if you have a hero out there or an inspiration, let me tell you, just write a letter because they will respond, if you're authentic and stuff. And you never know what kind of, they'll lead you towards. And so the biggest thing that helped me, I'll recommend a book here. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And it's about visualization. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that your imagination is the divine, as Neville Goddard would put it, as actually that is sort of the backbone of Judeo-Christian thought, is that God is man's imagination and lives through you. And wherever you can think and see in your head and visualize, the more complex and real that becomes, comes out in manifestation. So that's what I was doing. I saw the logo on my PC. I saw the screen. I saw the number of episodes, and I just sat there. That really helped me to move beyond the fear and the disbelief of, like you said, the imposter syndrome, because for like 2 years I had 100 people listening to my show.
Right.
That's not exactly what people would call successful.
Right. So you went through 2 years with maybe feeling like I'm not reaching the amount of people I want
100 downloads per episode. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how many episodes were you putting? You said you were putting out like 3 at sometimes.
3 at the time.
So 3 a week, 100 downloads. And I'm curious now, looking back on it, was there anything that you weren't doing that you could have done to help that? Or was that just necessary? That was just like part of the growth?
I think for my particular journey, that's just what it is. I think because my core identity is one of integrity and trust, I had to earn that trust.
Mm.
A lot of people will tell you to market on Facebook and all this stuff. I tried that and failed, and I hired the best. I flushed 20 grand down the toilet. And I haven't spent a single dollar in advertising since, because it was like, that's not my journey. It may be your journey. Don't compare journeys. Your journey is your specific journey, and you will be guided to the best way to get you where you go. Don't worry about what you have to do. Have a clear vision, like Neville Goddard said, and Jesus said, and Mark, when he talks about how to get your prayers answered, he's like, believe that you've already received. There's this concept of past tense. Neville Goddard would say, live in the end. That's what I learned from psychocybernetics. Is I saw the podcast completed. I saw it on Apple, at the time, iTunes, and I saw the number of episodes. I saw it all as visually. That will compel you. That will drive you. Don't worry about how to get from point A to point B. That will come, like in the hero's journey. When it's time for the guide will come. The resources will come. When you play Zelda, the sword will come, the coins will come. Don't worry about it. Just go and do and stay the course, and it will come through, because now I've got 24,000 subscribers without advertising.
I sense that there's spirit is guiding you, and you went on the journey. And so there's like that deeper truth. And then was there anything surface level, traceable, that kind of tipped? Like, was it consistency over years? Was it further alignment with your authenticity and true self and purpose? Or like what do you feel was the tipping point?
To keep it back in the divine relationship and the extension, it's like, will you follow? Will you do the steps that I tell you to do in order for this to manifest the best way possible for you? I was frustrated for a really long time, naturally, that I was like working really hard and really passionate about it. And, the guidance was focus on the show, create a better quality show, create better quality content, serve your listener. I mean, I'm going to repeat that, because that was the real thing, was quit worrying about me, quit worrying about how many likes. What is this in for me? It's not about you. You are a vehicle. You and your podcast are a vehicle to serve the community. And if you can wrap your mind around that, you'll probably get there quicker than I did. Because we're taught to be survivalists in many respects by, as Jesus would put it, the world of Caesar. That's not the way this world works, this illusion, this labyrinth, this holodeck, if you will. It's about serving other. You give out. You're the vehicle for the energy to flow through, not for you to try to extract it from the world, but to receive it from the higher power. And so that takes time, that takes trust. But when I did that, and I did it consistently, I literally went from, at the time, like I think 3,000 subscribers, to literally within 2.5 months, I hit my first 17,000.
Wow. That's crazy.
And it was just about this following the guide, following the path, and doing the tasks that were there right before me. For me, it was focus on the tribe, serve the tribe.
It's super huge wisdom, and kind of like an anthem and a mantra that I think that all podcasters can kind of rally under is that. And I think that if it gets too bogged down in strategy and, like you said, sort of like self-aggrandizement or just like trying to inflate myself over serving as much as possible. And I think that's absolutely what, like, everything comes down to. People are choosing to play us in their ear in the most intimate, loud space. And therefore we have sort of a duty to not only like provide good content, but to try and remind them about the deeper things. So I'm really grateful that you keep bringing it back to spirit. And I think in my brand, I'll just speak candidly about Podcast Farm and Be On Air. I've been hesitant. How much do I want to put my faith out there? How much do I want to put my beliefs? How much do I want to put my relationship with Source? And I was raised in the Hindu tradition my whole life. And I have deep affinity for Christianity, all religions, Buddhism. And it's scary to put some of that out because I noticed that external fear energy kind of being like, well, you might alienate some people. But the truth is, it's like, if I have your attention right now for even 10 seconds, it's my duty to say, like, look inside and try and connect with God. Something like that is really, it's prime real estate, right? Like,
Well, and dude, I get it. I mean, I struggled even in the early years because I was resonating with the Judeo-Christian, not Christianity. Christianity is a religion and it has nothing to do with the text. But Christianity is a very loaded word with like Jim and Tammy and all of these crooks, and not to mention the whole entire history of slavery and slaughter and fear. So I totally get it. I was fortunate to have a really cool Christian come on the show and was just like, throw out the bathwater, but don't throw out the baby.
right.
And that was something that I had to grow in confidence in and to put into the message. I'm like, I don't care what you call it. We're talking about the same thing. I'm not going to get into that. I mean, you set your own tone. You have to set your own frequency because you're not for everyone. You can't. Even Jesus told his apostles, he's like, if you get rejected, just shake it off because they're not your crowd. And so I think, in terms of if we want to give some golden nuggets, who are you? What's your message? And stay true. The more you radiate your divine light, all those negative people, it's not that they don't exist. It's just they cannot exist in light. They retract, they run. So I get the fear, but I'm here to tell you that if you just do your thing and do it with confidence and do it with humility, whatever your message is, whether it has divine connection or not, because it probably should, because that's all that there is in reality, but it will work itself out. That's what I'm talking about. The more you're in your zone, you're in that center, and you're living authentically the way that you were created. My uncle was Hopi, and there's the expression that is when you stop seeking wisdom and just, it comes when you just live the life that the Creator intended for you. Quit worrying about trying to please everyone. You won't. You can't. It's impossible. Do your thing, even if it means for years and years that you only have 100 people, because those 100 people are still with me. They're loyal. You want super fans, as Pat Flynn would put it. You don't want likes. You don't want all that. You want people that you're really affecting and changing. And so, I'll leave that to what that is for everyone, but that should be your core value. It's like, if you just serve the tribe and you serve authentically and you serve with that vulnerability and openness. I mean, we talk about abuse, and toxic relationships. You will find you won't find, your tribe will find you, because your show, you are like a broadcast tower. And if you don't have a strong signal, people can't pick it up. And you don't have to worry about, are there people to pick it up? There are people to pick it up, but they can't find you if you're not resonating with clarity and singular focus.
Yeah. I think we call it like niching down sometimes. And I feel like that's maybe a little superficial, actually. It's like we need to resonate that purpose. That is the niche, like our truest mission, our real quest here. That's the niche.
Yeah. I mean, niche is obviously a marketing term, and I love marketing, but niche really does have some sort of negative connotation. But you are right. It is the same as niche, but we get so wrapped up, like you were saying before, the perfection and the likes and how will I be received. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
can impart anything, like, don't worry about what people are going to think. Just rock your shit.
And that's the number one thing that like in all these groups, all these new podcasters, they post their show. There's a few downloads, and I totally get that. And I think I came from the music industry, put out many albums, toured, all that stuff. And so I got used to that, just realistic expectations around releases and numbers and what's good and what's a lot and what's not. And I think people get really disheartened, and this is really important advice and just really good feedback of how to keep our fire ignited so that we can make that journey. And kind of circling back to the hero's journey, you were talking about holodeck, VR, the game of life. I'm super interested in this. I just got the Facebook Quest 2, the VR headset, and I've been curious about the potential for podcasting in this virtual space. But the really interesting thing is when you take it off, it even further kind of feels like this is another layer of virtual reality. And when you start to look at life that way, as a quest, as there's these challenges, there's these allies, there's a lot of fun to be had there. It's just like so ripe with joy to perceive that, and what is our character. And so you're into branding and marketing, and I'm wondering, like, for podcasters, like, what is some branding nuggets that you could give for people just starting out, knowing that things can change, needing to do it as good as possible? How can people start to explore kind of like their avatar, their character, their podcast? How can they start to manifest that?
Well, I think it goes back to being authentic, with like taking your mask off and really just not giving a shit what people think. And I know that takes time. I mean, there was definitely a journey for me of removing, even like the mythology of the Buddhist statue that the monks covered, the gold statue that they covered up in stone, right? Because they were about to be pillaged and stuff, and you forget. And so that's the process of removing the stone to get back to the golden interior. So that will take time, but I would say start that now.
Mm-hmm.
In terms, if you want some marketing language, the best marketing language that I found that resonated with me was like, the world is filled with brown cows, and you want to be a purple cow. So if everyone else is doing it, don't do it. Do the exact opposite. Otherwise, you're going to blend in. So if your logo looks the same, if your marketing looks the same, if your social media looks the same, if you're doing the same quotes, I was going to say something else a little bit more derogatory, but if you post something, let me just give you a little bit of advice too, and you're just posting it because everyone else is posting like ubiquitous statements on gratitude, you're going to fail. If you're going to post something in sound bites, put a little thought of your own thought on your social media about what that interpretation is for you. That's another way to build the trust, to build sort of that guru guide mentality, because otherwise you're just like everyone else who just throws up a post of something they have no idea what they're talking about. Obviously, we deal a lot with spirituality in my show, but whatever that is for you, if you're a marketer in a marketing podcast, help people explain, help them to understand these things, because I can guarantee you they don't. They've heard it. Everyone else is screaming the same stuff. But can you show up differently? Can you be that purple cow and break it down, open the door for them so they can walk through? I mean, this is what I believe about humanity. And we see a lot of people who are disconnected. They're not in alignment with the divine. They wouldn't act the way that they do in society right now if they did. And you have to forgive them because they're desperate. They're entrenched in fear. But I think we're all the same. We're all from source. So you can't judge someone whether they're good or bad. But if people knew better, they would behave better. So the best thing that you can do now, I think, in the terms of time, is like show up differently, help people, open the door, even if it's just your personal opinion about what you're posting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of this whole idea of thought leadership. It's like if there's no contribution, there's no leadership. There has to be something that we're giving from ourselves to add on, not just reposting quotes or throwing up the soundbite that doesn't have anything added into it.
People can sniff that out. They can sniff out the fake. Most people, anyway. I believe that firmly. Start thinking of yourself as the leader of a tribe. And people are looking for you. They will look towards you. You don't want to get into the whole like worship thing. We see a lot of people, and their ego takes over. You don't want to be an egoistic asshole, you just want to be the vehicle for service. And to me, that's the greatest thing that I've learned about podcast. And podcast, you know, building an incredibly loyal tribe that keeps constantly expanding. Because something I learned from Napoleon Hill was your customer, to use his language, is your best salesperson. So if you can change one person, they're going to tell their friends. You guys are probably, maybe not everyone's old enough, but there used to be a commercial in the 70s and early 80s for Breck shampoo or whatever, Willa Blossom or whatever. It's like they tell their friends and they tell their friends, and the screen kept multiplying. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Instead of collecting a whole bunch of indifferent people who don't care and don't resonate, and they're scrolling their whole entire lives. Take your message, get clear on your message, keep doing it, even when it looks like you're not succeeding. And I guarantee you that one day someone's going to come to that show and hear it, and you're going to make a huge difference in their life, and they're going to never stop talking about it. They will be your best salesperson, and then those people will be your best salespeople. And before you know it, you have a tribe of people out there spreading the word.
It's so true. I was just thinking about kind of why I got into this business of podcasting in the first place. And my mentor, Jason Gaddis of the Relationship School, they teach folks how to have indestructible partnerships through, learning how to do conflict better, basically. And his podcast is awesome. He has like over 300 episodes as well, and interviews all the leading relational experts. And I tell so many people about that show. Like at least I've told at least 20 to 30 people, and that's real organic reach right there. And so you're totally right. So building this loyal tribe, the 1,000 true fan thing, and I would say even 100 true fans is really powerful over 1,000 paid Instagram followers or something, like you're saying. These people that aren't really engaged, they're not really connected with you. And so I think that's a huge takeaway from this, is to hunt and discover our true authentic self, and then to unmask that and give that to our community and our tribe, and like you said, to be a leader and to contribute something to the space.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up something that was a lesson that I had to learn, especially that paid followers. They're not real paid followers. And if they're there, and like Facebook is a great example, if you have thousands of so-called followers, but they don't engage with your work, Facebook isn't going to show your stuff. So it's better to let this grow organically and trust that build it and they will come. I know that's from a movie, but it's true, but just be patient. It's a long game. It's not a quick fix. And so and again, this is how I was in the beginning too. I was desperate. I was desperate to change my life. I was desperate to turn this into a business for my own survival. And that's an energy frequency that's going to come out, whether people can smell it out, sniff it out, but even bigger than that, puts that out into, the quantum field, and you're just going to get more of it. So you're going to have to learn how to chill and trust, and just have the mindset that this is important to me. I am a podcaster, and I'm in this for the long haul. Change that narrative, and then just be grateful when it does change, because it will change. If anyone who can speak to that would be me, going from 100 people to 24,000 people without advertising. I hope everyone's taking that in. It's like, just do your job and do it with integrity, and show up and do it for your tribe. And it's just going to happen. It cannot not happen.
That's super inspiring, Billy. I feel like there's so many takeaways from this episode already. I'm trying to find our path home, because I could tell it would be great to do a round 2 eventually. There's a lot to talk about. So you're also an author. What is that relationship for you between podcasting and author? And if as you're comfortable, could you illuminate a little bit of how your podcast fits into your business, and just like, what is your ecosystem a little bit?
The book originally was written as a marketing tool. I'm not going to lie. The self-publishing, put all the little links inside the book, to get people to sign up for the podcast. It was a way to generate. That was one of those little games that you got to play. Now, I've rewritten the book a couple times, and it is a great, and it's a good book. I mean, I share my journey, but again, I'm going to say, don't do it for the marketing. Do it for the authenticity, for the purpose of intent of sharing, because don't listen to those people. There are people who've asked me to be on summits, when they find out that I don't have 5,000 people on my email list, they don't want to participate with me. And I'm like, well, I'm not a number. My tribe is not a number. We're humans. So write the book. If you got a book in you, write the book. Just don't do it as a marketing scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be that. In terms of what's going on now, I collapsed my universe, if you will, and focused on the podcast. Now, this year we are expanding. We're on our fourth issue. We have a free monthly digital magazine called Rising Phoenix, which, again, we serve the tribe. It's free. That's going really well. We're starting to get into things like t-shirts. There was a course at one time. I've tried doing courses. What we're moving to in the future, and what we're going to be expanding into next year, is creating actually a community. Because of the nature that we talk about, of being in abusive and toxic and violent relationships. And most of those so-called support groups out there will keep you trapped in the narrative of victimhood. And from the very beginning was like, there's got to be something different, because I don't want to be that way anymore. So we're looking into that, and to doing something offline, and really just constantly moving forward and serving the tribe. What that ends up being, the tribe will tell us. We just got done doing an extensive survey. And so I would recommend that too. I've done that many times throughout my podcasting journey, is make a call to action, get a Google form, and just, get a link. If you can brand it, sweet. If not, don't worry about it. And ask your listeners, say, hey, I want this show to be about you. They will respond. So that's what we're doing. We're really, really doing a much, much deeper dive in serving the tribe of Phoenixes as we expand. So we contracted, we got real tight, got real focused, and now we're starting to expand out. Where that goes, I don't know. I'm getting on other people's shows. I'm doing summits. I want to personally move into public speaking. I love talking, obviously. I'm talking a lot here today, sorry. But that's what I feel that I am. I'm sort of this guide, if you will. I'm stepping into this guide thing, and it moves beyond podcast, which again kind of makes me think about when I started this journey in podcasting. I never saw it being where it is today. That's what I'm saying. Don't give up on your dream, because it will change. It will evolve organically. All you have to do is sort of step on that next step of your path and just be in that moment. And then the next one will come, and you just keep growing and you keep growing. There are other ways, if you want, in terms of talk of building and growing and making money, that don't have to be on those things. So nothing's good, nothing's bad. I'm not here to make judgment. Just don't follow the crowd if it feels wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. I love the growth and the expansion and the contraction and just your development. Thank you for sharing that, and tying into the main pillar content that you speak about with abusive relationships and things. I just want to give you some airtime here. If there's any if you wanted to kind of share the thesis or what your main message is for anyone listening, just so that we could touch on it. And then, of course, recommend that everyone goes immediately and subscribes to the Unshakable Self-Confidence podcast.
Well, I'll share with you the tagline of the show, which is our philosophy, which that's also another great point. Find out what your purpose is, and then try to put it into a small statement. Mm-hmm. Read Storybrand. That's a really great book that will help you. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That was a great book to help me get this crystal clear. And the tagline is getting to the root of your self-doubt, overcoming your painful past, and teaching you how to transform into a truly confident person. That's our mission statement. That's what we do. Whether it is podcast, whether it is in the magazine, whether it's, the Facebook Lives, whether it's anything. That is the essence, is who you are. What's the core value of your tribe? And so that's what we do, and that's ours. And we stay there, and that will guide you and lead you. So that's who we are, and that's another little bit of wisdom to pass down. Get that straight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I need to work on that a little bit. I think for me, I'm really inspired by this format as a crucible, as a vehicle for transformation. And I feel convinced that if people start on the path, just because of everything you're saying, like having to come up with artwork, having to come up with a description, having to come up with that first content, even meditating on 20 of your heroes, all those things condenses into this transformation that happens. And I'm confident that people, if they embark on this path, they will experience life changes.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, to speak to you directly and to everyone else, in this process of becoming a podcaster, you will transform because you have to transform. Think about where I was, you know, almost strangled to death, and where I am now. You change, and the beauty of that is you are the guide. The more that you change and the less that you resist in personal transformation, because you can't change anyone. Your job is not to change anyone. Your job is to change you. And when you do that authentically, you radiate something that most of the world does not, and it will be the magnet that will draw. And that's the lesson here in my story is like, the more that I was willing to let go of my ego, the more I was willing to let go of the fear about what other people perceive me, and just allow the divine to strip and burn, to use the Phoenix logo, away all the impurity. That's when growth changes. I don't know why. I don't have the answers to that, but that's just the rule. And you will grow. The more you grow, your podcast will grow, and you'll be the better for it, because that's what people are looking for. They're not looking for someone to tell them what to do. They're looking for proof positive of change. Mm-hmm. So I'll just leave everyone with that.
Yeah. Wow. This has been awesome so far. I think as we're winding down here, I want to just kind of figure out how people could get in touch with you. If people wanted to work with you, what's the best way for people to connect?
Yeah. If the podcast is what they're looking for, that's obviously, it's on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else. If you want to be part of the tribe in terms of the collective, there is the magazine. It's unshakableselfconfidence.com/magazine, and you will get the free subscription to Rising Phoenix. The tagline is the official free magazine of the Unshakable Self-Confidence podcast. But I answer my own emails, which is billy@unshakableselfconfidence.com. I have a YouTube channel where I do the daily inspirational quotes I was telling you about, where I help people to go dive deeper. I get lots of comments there, and I respond to everyone, because that's my job. Whatever way you want to reach out to me, go ahead and do it, and I'll be there.
That's epic. I see you showing up and serving, and it's really inspiring to see your work. As you popped up on LinkedIn, and within the first 30 seconds, I was like, yeah, okay, your tribe. I get it. And I think that's the key, right? That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to amplify our true self. We're trying to amplify that, and that's going to resonate with our true people. And so I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing out in the world, these great conversations. I would love to have you back on again in the future after I've integrated all this wisdom. You shared so many great books. I'll put those links in the show notes for those resources you mentioned as well. And yeah, any last words you want to share with the audience before we sign off?
It's all an illusion. Fear is a lie. You're the master over it. And all things are possible. You just have to stay the course. And your job isn't to change anyone else. I can't iterate that enough. Just be the change. Like Gandhi said, be the change. And that's how you actually create real change in the world.
Amen. Hallelujah, brother. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
I appreciate it. Thanks again, man.
Take care, Billy. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Be On Air. I hope you enjoyed it and are now one step closer to turning on your microphone and broadcasting your message to the world. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know how I can help you on your broadcasting journey by getting in touch with me, and maybe even apply for a strategy session if you want to discuss your podcast idea. You can reach me at www.podcast-farm.com. Till next time, my friends, I'm Kaylee Marks, and thanks for tuning in to Be On Air.